So we all know there really actually are only two views on climate change. You either believe it's happening and there are consequences, sea level rise, temperature rise, floods and droughts. Or you believe it's a hoax. Apologies for the language there, but I thought it would help set the context. So what really is climate change about when we have such divergent views? One, the science is obvious. And that's not me saying it. It's the government of United States in its report that they just released last week, where they clearly state that much of what humans have built is unsuited to the world as it exists today. So if the science is clear, then why such divergent views on the issue of climate change? Because it's about politics. And do you know why it's about politics? Because it's about the money. And that's not me saying it. Again, it's the same report by the US government saying it. And they clearly say that the added cost of living in that world will be to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. Three questions really when I say it's about money. One, what is the cost? Two, to whom? And three, who should pay? It's fundamentally these three questions that determine the position of climate change today. Three questions, and all about money. And that's what we call climate finance. Traditionally, this is money that we believe needs to flow from rich countries to poor countries to meet the climate challenges in developing countries because the rich countries caused it. That sounds like a really good moral story, but unfortunately there's a problem. While the developed countries agree that they need to pay for it, it's only going to be a portion of it, if at all. And we need to think about whether we have the time while the governments out there negotiate and think about where exactly this pie will stop at. Do we have the time? Let me illustrate this with a story and make it real for you. That's Sherali. He lives by a river, and when the 2010 floods happened, he lost his home, his cow, and his standing crop. He had to end up living in an emergency shelter for over 4 months, and his kids didn't end up going to school for a good 1 year because of different vector-borne diseases. If at that time the government had thought and been proactive and set up the right flood protection at a fraction of a cost, people like Sherali and 200 others like him in that vicinity would not have had such devastating impacts on their lives. But the governments decided to spend elsewhere. Now we need to step back and think about it. Do Sherali and millions of people like him living in Pakistan, South Asia, and across developing countries have the time to wait till the governments actually negotiate on climate finance? $10 billion. That's the amount it cost us, our economy, when the 2010 floods happened. If we had been proactive, we would have been able to save quite a fraction of it. So it's not like waiting is actually saving us the time anyway. We're spending it much more than that. So using this scenario, I'd like us to think about redefining climate finance. Thinking of it as every single penny that we spend, deliberately, smartly, because it matters. Pakistan roughly spends about $20 billion on development annually. That's a lot of money to work with, especially when the money that you spent on climate change is not just spent on climate change. Think about the research in agriculture. Think about the dams that you're setting. Think about using climate finance as that burning plank which could actually help you redefine how you can use this money and think about solving most of your problems as they are at the moment. And I'd like to illustrate this through 4 particular shifts. Shift 1, you don't need to spend more. You just need to spend differently. Do you know what the problem with climate change is? Since it's everybody's business, it ends up being nobody's business. Think of the sectors that it actually impacts: agriculture, water, energy, mobility. When these sectors plan their annual plans, they don't even consider climate change as a priority. In fact, it's not even an afterthought. Which is why it's important to have this mindset shifted. The moment that mindset shifts, it'll be very easy for us to start spending on solar, hydro. It'll help us think twice before we start investing in coal power. We'll be able to prioritize flood protection schemes. We'll be able to prioritize water conservation schemes. That is the shift we need to make. Number 2, we need to leverage existing investments. Let me give you an example of one of the most controversial projects in Pakistan right now, the Peshawar BRT. It's ugly, there are delays, there are design flaws, and the people of Peshawar are not happy. And in all likelihood, once the buses hit the road, there will be congestion issues. So why don't we try and think about using this challenge and turning it into an opportunity, and actually think about, say, congestion charges. I know it sounds really far-fetched, because we limit ourselves in thinking about such ideas. We don't push ourselves to think about using these things in a way that would benefit us. The investment has already been made. $500 million have already been invested in this project. We just need to cash in on it. Shift 3. If we're able to create the right momentum and make it worth people's while, people will get into action. Very small example. Think of the light bulb in your house, the old filament bulb. If you actually decide to move to an energy efficient one, you're doing 3 things. 1, you're reducing your cost ultimately, you're reducing emissions, and you're actually promoting a new economy. Think of it as a win-win-win. Why not? Multiply that by millions that will actually do that, and then we see an impact. Finally, I just want to come back to where I started off from. Developed countries have caused climate change, and it is very essential that they actually pay for it. Therefore, it's important to understand what is out there. A green climate fund in which actually 2020 billion onwards, the developed world has promised to put in about $100 billion where countries like us can actually access it. It has about 8 billion right now, but nonetheless, there is money. So it's important for us to understand that this money will not be doled out to us. We have to compete for it. That is my 4th shift. In conclusion, if we redefine climate finance from what we actually know it to be in the traditional sense, if we actually start spending differently, if we actually start leveraging the existing investments, we actually get people to take action, and of course we try and compete for climate finance internationally, our future could actually look very different. Our future must look different. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.